Welcome to week 5 of the Freedom Ticket. Congratulations on making it this far. We're about to start getting into the really good nitty-gritty stuff of helping you launch your product and get it going on Amazon. So right now what I want to talk about is where to source products. There's lots of different places where you can actually source your product once you found it and try to get it made. And so I want to give you some ideas of where you can look for these types of products. Now, if you look in the handouts, there's actually a section there where I actually give you a list of 20 some odd different places that you can actually source. So take a look at that. But I'm just going to talk about a few of the big ones that most people use, but there's tons of other places that you can look at. Another thing you want to do is if you're actually sourcing out of China, you want to actually make sure that you're sourcing from the region that makes these products. So if you look in the handouts for this module as well, there's like a map of China, and it will give you an idea of like this area of the coast over here, they're known for making these products. And this area down in the south is known for making these products. This area in the interior is known for making these products. And when you're looking for factories, if they're not in one of those areas, that should be a red sign, a red flag that, hey, this doesn't sound quite right. Now, a lot of people are always wondering, should they go with a trading company or with a factory? It doesn't always matter. Sometimes the factories don't speak English at all, and so they only work through trading companies because the trading company people speak English. And that doesn't mean you're always going to get the worst price. So a trading company can be a good thing, or it can be a not so good thing. If a trading company is selling like 100 different types of products, they're selling automotive stuff, baby stuff, pet stuff, that might be a red sign that this is a company that the prices might be marked up. But if it's a trading company that specializes in a certain line of products, like they only specialize in sporting goods, and they only deal with a couple factories as their source, that's not necessarily a bad thing. But when you have a company that's not based in the region of China where they're actually known for manufacturing, it's just something you want to look a little bit deeper into and make sure that everything is good. The number one site most people go to is Alibaba.com. It's the most well-known. It's what most people teach to go to. Some people might go to AliExpress because they're buying smaller quantities of items. AliExpress and Alibaba are very similar, but they have slightly different pricing models. Alibaba is more for larger orders. AliExpress is more for smaller orders. A lot of the drop shippers will use AliExpress. Some people that order small quantities will order from there. Now, I don't recommend you start off with a small quantity. You will see people that talk about in different courses and online, you should test products. I don't believe in that at all. If you've done your homework using Helium 10 and done your research properly, you should actually launch products properly. And that may mean ordering 500 or 1,000 or even perhaps more units initially. People that say you should buy 20 or 30 or 50 and test something, I don't think that's a good business model for selling on Amazon. The only time that makes sense is if it's a brand new product. Say you found something on Etsy, or you found something that's made in Guatemala, and there's nobody really selling this type of product on Amazon, and you're not quite sure, then maybe you buy 10 or 15 or 50 and do a little bit of a test. But if you've used the tools and actually found something that's working really well, don't do a test order. Go into it and do it properly. Another great website is globalsources.com. Sometimes you can find higher level factories there. I found some of my best factories there. It's not quite as complete as Alibaba, but both Global Sources and Alibaba, they're not just China. They also have Vietnam and India and even some US factories as well. Another great site is 52WMB. If you want it in English, you just put EN in front of it, en.52WMB. And there's like 30 some odd countries on there where you can find all kinds of stuff. There's some great stuff coming out of Turkey and Europe, and you can find really cool things. Another place where you can find a source is going to PLMA.com. That stands for the Private Label Manufacturing Association. They have an annual trade show that they do in Chicago. It's everything about private label. You could actually go to that show if you want to, or just look at their website, and they have a list of all the different people that do private label there. And that can be a great source as well. You can also go to the ASD show in Las Vegas. It's held twice a year in Las Vegas. It's at the convention center. That's a huge show. They have an area called Source Direct where a lot of manufacturers come in. You can find some manufacturers for your product. You can also go to the trade shows in China. We've talked about like Yiwu and Canton and some of the other ones that are in Hong Kong around Global Sources. You can also go to some of the more specialized trade shows. For example, if you're selling products in the beauty category, You can go to Cosmoprof in Las Vegas. That's a great show at the Mandalay Bay that's got all kinds of beauty products. Or say you're selling pet stuff. There's the Pet Expo that happens in Orlando, like in April of every year, and Super Zoo that's usually in the summer in Las Vegas, where there's all kinds of great pet stuff. Maybe you're looking for stuff that's made in the United States and you really want to go with a U.S. manufacturer. You can go with the Thomas Directory as a great source for finding U.S. manufacturers. Just remember that in the U.S. the MOQs are a little bit higher. They don't really want to deal with small orders. Now, if you're doing anything that's edible or a topical, something that goes in the body or on the body, I really recommend you try to shy away from some of the Asian countries. Sourcing those things out of China, you can do it, but I don't recommend it. Some of the ingredients may come out of China or may come out of India or South America, but actually doing the actual manufacturing in the U.S. for those products is going to make your customers feel a lot more comfortable. So anything edible or topical, I would recommend you get out of Europe or you get out of the United States. It's just your customers, there's going to be a lot of people that ask, what's the origin of this? And when you say it's China or Vietnam or somewhere else, they're going to be a little bit hesitant and it could hurt your sales. Another thing that you can use to actually find products are sourcing agents. Now, sourcing agents are people that specialize in helping you find a product. You tell them, hey, I'm looking for this particular thing. I'm looking for an ab roller that has 2 straps and a knee pad and whatever. And they have the relationships and the sources usually in China, and they'll go out and they'll find it for you. So there's ones in China, there's ones in India, ones in Vietnam, and they will go out and they will actually find the factory for you, and they'll get the samples in, they'll vet it, and they'll find the best price at the best quality for you. They do charge a fee for that. Some of them actually just charge a flat one-time fee. Other ones actually require a percentage of whatever the order is. So every time you order, they want a percentage of that. But sometimes that percentage, they can get you such a better price because they speak the language. They really know which stones to overturn, because most of the manufacturers in China are not on Alibaba. Only a small percentage of the people that actually make things are on Alibaba or some of these websites, because they have to pay to be there. And it costs money. So some of them, they have so much business, they do so well, they're like, we don't need to go advertise. And so these sourcing agents can find these better factories a lot of times, and you can save a lot of money. And maybe they don't speak English, so they're not on these places. They don't go to the Canton Fair. They're not in the Yiwu Market or not on these websites. And those can be really awesome sources that your competition's going to have a hard time finding. Another thing, places like these are like Source Asia is a website that will help you do some of that stuff. Or if you go to Kevin and Steve, Kevin Steve.com, that's another place where you can help find some of the type of products that you may be looking for. Now, another one that's great is to reverse engineer your competition on Amazon. So what you can actually do is you can say someone's selling an ab roller on Amazon. You can actually see who that their top competition is, look at their company name or their store name, and then go over to one of these websites like Panjiva.com or USA Import Data or Import Genius. And those websites, all for a fee, will actually do what's called a reverse search for you, import search. In the United States, and this is unique to the United States, what's called a bill of lading, which is kind of like the document of the contents of a shipment that's coming into the United States, is public information. And so these companies get this public information from the government, and they put it into this big searchable database. And you can then go in there and search this database. So if you know the company's name, you can actually go in there and type in their name and see what they're importing. And then what you can do is then order a sample off of Amazon of that product, and you can take a look at the product, and it's kind of like a random sample. Another thing these websites do is you can type in certain types of products. So you can type, if you're sourcing an ab roller, you can type ab roller or ab wheel or abdominal wheel or something like that. It has to be the exact wording that's used on the bill of lading, but it will find all the factories that are bringing in ab rollers. It's not just to sell on Amazon, but this could be the big chain stores in the United States. It could be all kinds of places. And you can see who's bringing shipments over and over and over. And that probably means the product is a decent quality, and it's probably a pretty good factory. And so you could use that information and contact that factory. So that's another great way to actually find factories and to find information on who your competitors are using or who the big chain stores are using. And it can be a great resource. You can even go to like Panjiva.com, /manufacture-of. I think that manufacture and the of have to be capital letters, manufacture-of, and you can just type in, baby blankets, for example, and it will spit out a sample. It's not the whole database, but it'll give you a rough sample of the kind of information you can see, and that can be a valuable source to get good contacts and good factories you might want to contact to make your product. Now, when you order products from China, you're always going to want to make sure you get a sample. You should never place an order without actually getting a sample of the product. And I recommend you go contact at least 3 to 5 factories that you're comfortable with and get samples from 3 to 5 different factories and compare those samples. And maybe the samples from factory 1 and factory 3 are similar, but there's something about factory 3 that you like. That factory 3 is just a much higher price. So you could ask factory 1, hey, can you modify this a little bit to make it more like this one you got from factory 3? And maybe they can do that and you can save some money. But always make sure you get samples. And just remember, the samples that come from China are going to be the best one. They're going to spit shine it. They're going to clean it off. It's going to be the best one. Versus if you order something off of Amazon by using one of the methods of Panjiva, USA Import Data, or Import Genius, or one of those guys, you can actually, it's a totally random sample. So once you get the sample in, you're going to start negotiating the price. And just remember, when you're negotiating price in China, you got to make sure it's apples to apples, because sometimes they will make changes. So let's say it's a backpack and you have a zipper on the backpack, and your zipper might be made out of aluminum, and it's looks like it's silver, though it's painted silver. And maybe when you say, I need this for 10 cents less, they're like, no problem, they do it, but they change the zipper from aluminum silver into a plastic painted silver. And that's how they do it. So you got to make sure that everything stays the same, because they will cut corners by using cheaper materials, or maybe they don't have the right certifications. You got to make sure they have all the right certifications. So you want to be very careful on that. Now, when you get samples from China, you're typically going to have to pay for them. If you're in person, a lot of times they might give them to you free for a very cheap price. But if you're ordering them you're sitting in the U.S. and you're ordering them to your house or your office from China, they're going to charge you. And usually the sample might actually be free, but they'll charge you $50 or $75 for DHL or e-packet to ship it to you. And a lot of times what you can do is you can actually ask them, okay, I'll pay for that. And it's okay to pay PayPal or Western Union for that. Don't worry about it. Most of them won't take a credit card or anything, and they might add a small fee, like 4% or something, to the PayPal charge. That's kind of normal. When you negotiate that, you can say, well, if I end up going with your factory, you're going to discount me the price of the sample back off my order. And most of them will agree to do that. They just don't want people calling them and getting free samples, and they're spending all this money sending stuff all over the place all the time. And so those usually come within a week or 2 weeks. They're usually pretty good about getting those out, unless they have to make something special for you. Some of them will even put your logo on it. If you want to see how it looks with your logo embroidered on there or put it on there, some of them will kind of mock that up for you. And so that could be a great thing. Now, if you're using a sourcing agent, a lot of times they'll get the samples all sent to one address, and then they'll forward them on to you. There's also companies in China that will aggregate that for you. You can send all the. There's a guy that's based out of Australia that does this. If you look down in the notes, there might be a link for that, and he gathers all the samples into one area so they can ship them into one area in China, and then he sends them all to you in one box. So if you're doing a lot of product sourcing and looking at a lot of different stuff, that could save you quite a bit of money. So you could check that out as well. The advantage, like I said, these sourcing agents and these companies have is that they speak the language, and they're on the ground, and they kind of hold your hand through the entire process. One of the things too, once you find a factory that you're interested in doing business with, is you want to make sure that you actually see their business license. You can ask them for a copy of their license. If you look in the handouts here, there's a sample of a Chinese business license, and there's 2 characters. If you look on there, that'll tell you whether they're a trading company or not. They're 2 Chinese characters, so they're highlighted on the handout. But you want to get their business license. It's just a way to actually vet them. Now, if you really want to check the factory, there are services. There are inspection companies that will do a whole factory inspection that for usually about $300, $400, $500. They'll go out and they'll actually make a physical inspection of the factory and walk through it and take pictures and make sure everything is legit and make sure this is not really some guy in his garage. That's up to you whether you want to do that or not. Inspection services like Asian Inspection or Topwin, TOPWIN. There should be some links down the bottom. They actually will do that for you if you want to. But always ask for that that just to verify that they're a legitimate factory. They do have an export license, because some of these factories actually don't have the right to export. And so sometimes the factory may say, hey, can you pay my buddy down the street because he's got an export license, I don't have an export license. So you always want to make sure it's much better for the factory to actually have the export license and you not to have to go through an intermediary. So that's another thing to always ask as well. And there's also another handout in this section of some common questions that you might want to ask your factory. So when you're vetting these people, you might want to ask them some of these common questions just to make sure everything's okay. Another thing is, when I'm contacting these guys online, the ones that don't respond to me very quickly, I kind of eliminate them. If I email them and ask for a quote and I don't get an answer back in about 48 hours, then I pretty much say I don't want to do business with these people because that tells me they're not on top of it. They don't really want my business. They're too busy with other things, or I'm not that important. So a lot of times that's a way that I screen people out as well, is even though they might be a great factory, if they're just not responsive, then that's something that I use to eliminate them. So in the handouts I mentioned, there's a document where I show you some really good questions to ask your factory. And these is a great way to vet your factory, in addition to seeing who doesn't respond to you very well by email. But you can also ask them these questions like, how many workers do you have? What's your monthly capacity in terms of units? Because maybe you're planning on selling 50,000 units a year, and they can only do 5,000 units every quarter or something. And so you want to make sure they have the capacity to grow with you. You can also ask them which markets they supply. For example, how much in Europe do you do? How much in the US? How much in Asia? And that can tell you a good indicator of the type of quality they have, because if they're focused mainly on Asia, the standards in Asia or say Africa are a lot lower than they are in Western Europe or the US. So that can give you an idea that, hey, you may have some problems, because if there's a small scratch on the bottom, they're probably not going to care. Versus someone in the US gets something that has a small scratch on the bottom that they're expecting to be new, they're going to be a little bit upset and maybe give you a bad review. So you want to see what countries are they focusing on. You want to try to find people that are doing more of the US and Western Europe if possible. You can also ask them sometimes what are their biggest customers. Sometimes they won't tell you, but sometimes they will. I've even found when I've been at trade shows, like in the Canton Fair, I can walk up into the booth and say, hey, do you supply anybody else on Amazon? And they'll say, oh yeah, we do this guy, and this guy. I'm like, oh really? And so I just will type it into on my phone onto Amazon. I'll see exactly who they're supplying, what kind of reviews they're getting, and everything. So you can also ask them, like, what retailers do they have any big retailers they supply? Like, do they go to Walmart or Target or any of the big retailers in the U.S.? Because if they do, those retailers have really strict rules, way much more than what Amazon has, and they have to go through a big vetting process to actually be able to sell to those companies. And so if they're actually doing a lot of products, like my dog bowl manufacturer, for example, does a lot of products for Coca-Cola. And so that told me, hey, these guys actually are probably a pretty good factory, chances are, because Coca-Cola doesn't mess around in their suppliers. They go through a major vetting process. They spend a lot of money and time, more than we do as Amazon sellers, to figure out who's good, because they don't want something coming back on them that this is child labor or this factory's filthy, or their big brand names are at a huge reputation. You also want to ask if they've gone through any third-party audits. And that could be both social audits and technical audits, because these audits, if they've been through that and they can show you the documentation, that's a good sign that's probably a good factory. There's some organizations in China that actually do this kind of factory auditing, and if they have that little seal up in their booth or on their website, those can be good indications that this is probably a good factory. Another question is, say, hey, what products do you specialize in? If they do one or two products, that means they're probably pretty good at those. But if they do like 100 different products, they might be good at a few of them, but some of them they're not so good because it's more of a side project. So the fewer products that they actually manufacture, oftentimes that's usually a factory that gets a little extra check mark in my book as someone I might go with. You also want to ask what's their biggest product that they currently make, because that's going to give you an idea of kind of where you are in the priority. If your product is similar to that biggest product, that means the machines and the production lines are set up a lot of times to run those type of products, versus if it's some sort of obscure thing and yours is something they make, but they don't make too many of them, you're probably not going to be the first priority. Another thing you want to ask is, do they have in-house testing? It's like, do they actually inflate the, if it has an airbag, do they inflate the airbags and then deflate it? Or if it's a cooking product, do they actually cook it and heat it up and make sure it actually heats? Do they have any kind of in-house testing? Now, there's third-party companies that I recommend. We'll talk about that in a later module, that you actually go have a hire to go in and do random testing. But that's something just to ask. And you could also ask, hey, are you a trading company or are you the actual manufacturer? And that can give you an idea. Another thing you might want to do is you might want to search for their name on Google. Whatever their factory name is, search for it on Google and see if there's anything. You should also check a website called supplierblacklist.com and see if they're on there. And because a lot of people report bad websites or people that have kind of screwed them on supplierblacklist.com, just make sure they're not on there. And then after you have a relationship with them, one of the things you can do is once you've placed a few orders, if you're visiting them in person or you're talking to them on Skype or WeChat, and say, hey, what's some of the stuff that you guys are working on? What's up and coming? And a lot of times they will tell you. These are things they haven't publicly announced yet or shown on their website or shown in a trade show because they don't want their competition to copy them. But they're working on this, and a lot of times they will actually tell you. Or you can actually go to the factory, and when you're at the factory, you can see, you want to walk around the whole place and like look in every room because like what's over here? What's over here? If you're doing a factory tour, because a lot of times you don't realize some of the things they make, and they just think it's not relevant to you, but you can get some great ideas that way. And not only does it strengthen the relationships when you visit the factories, it often helps you get better pricing, and you can see what other people are doing, see what other stuff's on their production line. It's a great thing to do. Once you get up and running, you don't need to visit a factory in the beginning, but once you get up and running and have a relationship, it's a smart idea to take a trip over to China. What a lot of people do is they combine that with one of the fairs, so they go over to the Canton Fair, and then they just in between the phases, or after the fair or before the fair, they take us some extra time and go over. There's also places like in near Guangzhou where there's cities that specialize in stuff. Like there's one city that specializes in toys, and you can actually go to that city and they have like permanent like display areas. Like it's a huge building with like 6 floors, and they have little break rooms and like little couches and tables, and you can go in there and they'll just bring stuff to you. They have a whole like warehouse. And you say, I'm looking for Tonka trucks, little trucks. And all of a sudden there's like 7 different factories sitting at your table with their trucks. There's all kinds of things you can do if you go in person down the road. Another thing you can do is do a search on Google Images. Go to Google and choose the images option and take the photo of your product. And from it could be from their website or it could be from Amazon, and see who else is selling or making a similar product. So you can get ideas that way. You can see what else is being done out there for this product, who's selling it. You could lead you to a potentially different factory even. So just those are some of the things you need to ask and to keep in mind when you're sourcing.